Good evening and welcome to this meeting of the Community Development Scrutiny Committee. My name is Councillor Diana Garrett and I'm the Chairman. Members, can I please remind you that this meeting is being webcast? There is no fire alarm test this evening, so should the fire alarm sound, we will vacate the chamber via the fire exit to the rear and assemble in the car park. As we move through the meeting, please can I remind everyone present to turn off their microphones when they've finished speaking. I shall now proceed with the business of the meeting. Agenda item 1, apologies for absence. I believe we have apologies from Councillor Mrs Wilson. Are there any further apologies?
No, Chairman, all other members are present this evening. Thank you.
If there are no more apologies, I'll proceed to declarations of interest. Agenda item 2. Do members have any disclosable pecuniary interest, other pecuniary interest or non-pecuniary interest that they wish to declare this evening? Please state the item and the nature of your interest. Councillor Mrs Pell.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. It isn't really a declaration, but I am part of Braintree District Council's cycling group.
Thank you very much. No more. I will proceed to agenda item 3, minutes of the previous meeting. Please can I have a proposer to approve the minutes as an accurate record of the previous meeting of the Community Development Scrutiny Committee on the 1st of September 2021. Thank you. Councillor Mrs Kilmartin, are you prepared to propose?
Yeah.
Thank you. And do I have a seconder, please? Councillor Andrew Hensman, thank you very much. The minutes have been moved and seconded as an accurate record. All those in favour, please indicate. Thank you. All those against, please indicate. No? Nobody. The minutes are therefore approved. Thank you. Agenda item 4, public question time. There don't appear to be any members of the public present this evening. So we will now proceed to agenda item 5, which is our scrutiny review into cycling and walking, our 4th evidence gathering session. Members, for this item, I would like to welcome Councillor Frankie Ritchie, Cabinet Member for the Communities, and Louise Flavel, Economic Development Officer, to the meeting. They've kindly agreed to attend the meeting in order to speak in more detail about the Council's draft cycling strategy. In fact, it's not a draft anymore, it has been approved, which was originally presented to all members at the extraordinary meeting of full council on the 20th of September. Councillor Ritchie and Louise, can I therefore invite you to provide an overview of the draft cycling strategy? Before you begin, could I kindly ask that you introduce yourselves to the committee as well and provide a brief summary of your respective roles as Cabinet Member and Officer for the benefit of those watching the meeting. If easier for you both, please feel free to take questions from members on the cycling strategy at the end. Thank you. Over to you, Councillor Ritchie.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Good evening, Councillors, and thank you for the invite. It's a pleasure to be here this evening. So for the benefit of the webcast, my name is Councillor Frankie Ritchie. I'm Cabinet Member for Communities here at Braintree District Council, and under that remit, one of the projects we were working on was the cycling strategy for the District Council. I'll just stop there for a second and let Louise introduce herself.
Good evening, my name is Louise Flavel and I work for Braintree District Council in the Economic Development team, and within that team I'm the officer who looks after infrastructure, so therefore cycling comes under that remit. Thank you.
Thanks, Louise. So just to give a very brief overview of the cycling strategy. So the cycling strategy, it started around about a year ago, so it's taken a whole year to get from the draft that it was proposed in up to an adopted strategy that it's been delivered to now. And through that year's transition, it's gone through, obviously it's gone through the governance structure within the council, so through the management structures to form a strategy that we then worked up with a wider group of councillors, and we formed a cycling strategy which involved all members across the political spectrum of the council, alongside public involvement too. So as part of that cycling strategy group, we were really benefited from public engagement from some not just kind of members of the public, but people who had a vested interest in cycling. So one of those was a chap called Peter Cohn, as some of you may know, within the community, and another chap was called Chris McCann, both very dedicated cyclists whose cycling forms a part of their everyday lives. But to use Peter Cohn as an example, someone who's very interested in cycling connectivity within the community and within the village locations, and is involved in a number of cycling projects. So through the medium of that cycling strategy steering group, we came up with some questions that we set about formulating to take to public engagement and consultation around what would the district like to see as part of a cycling strategy, or part of a draft cycling strategy. And again, through that group, we formulated a question set and went out to public engagement early on this year, and had a fantastic response. So it was one of the most responded to public consultations or engagement sessions that we had as part of the district council. We had a broad spectrum of results from individuals within the district. We had town and parish councils replying. We had groups, clubs, group members that replied to some of those, as part of that response too, and really fed in some really good kind of detailed information and pointers around what we should be considering as part of the draft strategy. I think what made the strategy different now compared to what we've had in the past was it gave us a chance to actually adopt something official. So in the past, previous to having any formal strategy, we just had kind of guidelines and policies around what we maybe could do as a district council. I think what the cycling strategy now gives us is something definitive that we can do and should do. And to that end, obviously we went through the consultation period, we had the response, so we factored that into our draft strategy and our implementation plan. And we brought that to council in draft format before bringing it, obviously, again back to council again in September as a policy to be adopted. I'll pause there for a second, because I've kind of really battled through it at a high level, and I'll give Louise a chance just to kind of add some of the more the governance and the policy bits and pieces that we considered as part of the considerations.
Thank you. I would just sort of like to talk about the differences really of what we built on from the policies that we had previously to the strategy that we have now, and the reasons that we put into those. As Councillor Ritchie mentioned, we went out to engagement, we had the steering group, but we also built on the policy. For instance, we built in behaviour change, which I think is really key to make sure that we cultivate that mindset for cycling, to make it a norm within the district. And things have changed. For instance, e-bikes have now been introduced and a lot more. They're a lot more affordable, which means that we can appeal to different communities, different demographics with our cycling, and we can build in a lot more. As we mentioned, we talked with many different partners and stakeholders which are now involved. And also we targeted our objectives a little bit more. So previously we talked about in the policy was increasing cycling, but now we're talking about doubling the amount of cycling. So we're really quantifying it to make it part of that vision in the strategy.
So as part of some of that partnership working, we've expanded our reach a bit more. So Louise mentioned partnership working, and we were working with a representative from Essex County Council. So it's one good thing having our own ambitions as a district council, but bearing in mind that some of the plans and ambitions that we've got affect things like highways and traffic. It's dependent on us partnership working with the planning authority that can assist us with achieving some of those ambitious goals. And we had, as Jackie will probably remember we had a chap called Julian from Essex County Council who was really, really helpful in not only just kind of keeping us grounded, but also kind of helping us kind of realise what some of that ambition could be. So rather than just act on our own ideas and our own thoughts for how we want to implement safer cycling across the district and increase cycling, there's also the opportunities to do partnership working with Essex County Council so that they can help us deliver. And that's really important on things like funding, for example. Some of the items that we want to deliver are scalable from not just a project size but also a financial element too. So having Essex County Council as one of our key partners to help deliver some of the strategy, we'll be able to take advantage of match funding, increased funding, grant funding, etc. So that as we deliver the cycling strategy and use the implementation plan to do that, we can start to identify smaller projects that we can deliver ourselves as an authority, and then as you kind of increase the project size and the financial size of that project, we then kind of stretch out to get partnership working involved so that we can help deliver some of the more infrastructure heavy projects that help us to deliver the plan. So I hope that's been a bit of a helpful kind of overview for those who weren't involved, although I'm sure through the due diligence process and the meetings that we've had at full council and at special meeting of council, you've probably had enough to understand the benefits that it's going to bring to the district. And then just lastly, from a personal perspective, it was accepted unanimously, so thank you all for your support individually and as a collective. We now have a really strong strategy that hopefully will see us for years to come and allow us to leave a legacy for the districts and everyone that's in it. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Ritchie, and thank you, Louise, for that. Before I take it to our members for questions, I'm really pleased that you gave this such a rigorous airing with the public and that they gave you a good response and that everybody seems to be on board with this, which is really, really important. Members supported it, as you said, unanimously. We're all quite excited about it, but we're all finding it a little bit confusing because it is such a big project that can mushroom into all sorts of different areas. And obviously you do need Essex County Council on board because they need to adapt the highways quite considerably, and that funding is very, very important. So I'll open it up to members and ask if you have any questions. Councillor Wright.
This is fitting quite well with Essex County Council's got a cycling strategy as well, haven't they? I take it this fits in quite well with their and dovetails into it, so we're not sort of at conflict with them.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that was one of the key benefits of having Julian as part of the cycling strategy. So there's absolutely a tie-up between what our ambitions are and also what Essex County Councils are. I think the beauty of having two individual strategies but that are aligned is that, as mentioned, you can tie up project resource and project funding for the benefit of both authorities. So rather than kind of start to dual or twin ideas and waste time or money, you've got that kind of coalescent thinking where you're both delivering the same project, but for the benefit of not just our district, but for their strategy across the county too. And one of the remarks that Julian made at our last strategy meeting is that as a district / county council working partnership, we're probably right up there with those that are really pushing forward with wanting to deliver a cycling strategy. So with that in mind, we want to strike whilst the iron's hot, and whilst we've got that partnership working nailed down, we really want to see what we can deliver.
Is it going to be Essex County Council highways which are going to be ruling the roost sort of thing on cycleways and tracks and, you know, the actual, because it's mostly going to be on roads, especially in towns?
I think we've got an ideal opportunity to kind of be the makers of our own destiny here. So whilst you quite rightly say they've got a say in the road structure because they're the lead they're the lead authority on highways. Things like footpaths and cycleways that already exist in our district are for us to kind of own and improve and suggest link-ups to road networks, etc. As long as they're safe to do so. So this isn't something where we will kind of be submissive and be led by the county. This is something where we will be working. There'll be projects that we will certainly work on our own to deliver, but we will also recognise when we need to ask for the county council's assistance to help us deliver some of the bigger projects too.
Chairman, if I just may as well to just remind members of their last evidence gathering session that was on the 1st of September, you had Tracy Vickers from Head of Sustainable Development, Essex County Council, and Chris Radley, the Cycling Strategy Lead Officer at Essex Highways, who came to the last meeting. And part of their evidence to this committee was around the work that they are doing with the District Council in developing the cycling strategies, so there is harmony between the two strategies, so there's no unnecessary tensions. So the information that Councillor Ritchie is giving you this evening, it dovetails the information that you were given at the last session, and that's all detailed in the minutes from the 1st of September for members. Thank you.
Thank you, Emma. Thank you for clarifying that. I have a quick question. I was looking at the Energy Saving Trust e-cargo bike grant fund. That's about 400,000, I believe, from the Department of Transport, and I know that Colchester has got involved in that. Is that something that you've explored?
Absolutely. At our last strategy meeting, that was certainly a piece of the pie that we highlighted. We would like a piece of. So as part of some of the kind of quicker wins, I know that we will be looking into the e-cargo bikes. It seems to be getting a bit more kind of traction now, a bit of kind of a European thing that's starting to translate over across to here. And certainly it's seen a lot more in London, but it is something that is becoming a lot more common here. So yeah, it was highlighted at our last cycling strategy meeting, and it is something that we are looking to try and find if we can.
Is that looking hopeful, or?
I'm not too sure yet. I haven't. Yeah, it's a bit kind of early days yet, and haven't had an update from officers. But it was something we were going to look into.
I think it's a very good thing to have these in the town, because once you see cyclists present, and they show a bigger presence because of all their flags and paraphernalia and things that they have on them, I think it makes the traffic more aware of cyclists generally as well. So it's a good starting point, I think, to get some of those in the town. I also have a second question about bike parking. I went onto the Plus Bike Greater Anglia website, where they say that you can look at Plus Bike and it will tell you what parking is in which train stations. But I couldn't, I kept pressing the buttons that it gave me and then clicking, and it just kept taking me around in circles. So I never actually got to find out what parking we have at Braintree train station, Whittam and Freeport. Is bike parking something that you reviewed in the town at all, or the three towns, perhaps Helsted, Whittam and Braintree?
So just from the top of my head, I know that we do have cycle parking at Braintree station. I believe we've got covered parking at Braintree station. We've also got our cycle parking here. I believe it's the same for Whittam as well. Helsted bike parking, the only place that I can think of that has got bike parking off the top of my head is the supermarket there. I can't think of any other places that's got. Actually, I think Cherry's got her hand up. She might be able to enlighten me for Helsted.
So there's also parking in Helsted up at the leisure centre as well, bike parking up at the leisure centre.
I was thinking more along the lines that if I found it difficult to find, if I was biking somewhere and I wanted somewhere to park my bike, then I would want to know in advance where I was going to cycle to. I wouldn't want to go from one side of the town to the other looking for somewhere to park. So I think that's something that we will probably discuss again. Councillor Mrs Cole-Martin.
Thank you, Councillor Garrett. Whittam. So I know that when the new station is going to come, whenever that comes, because they're short of funding at the moment, we are going to have one of these wonderful new double-decker bike parking events. So I think the station is probably taken care of. In the High Street, i.e. Newland Street, there is no parking provision for bikes. But Tesco has about 4 slots where you can park your bike. That's not enough for anybody coming into town generally. And if you've got a large basket full of shopping, I suggest that cycling is probably not quite as safe then as your car. So there's nowhere else that I can think of in Whittam that has it. New builds all have to be built with a spot for cycles to be parked, so that takes care of the home parking aspect mostly. And I don't know if you're aware of any others. Newland Street does not have parking facility for bikes. So
If I may, what I'll do is I'll take that one away, and if there is a need for some additional cycling parking, then we can see where we might be able to add that as one of our quicker wins as part of the cycling strategy. But I will take that away and.
Can I go on a bit?
No, Councillor Cole-Martin. It's not really part of the terms of reference in the cycling strategy as well. It's more to do with planning. So we'll cover that.
I was going to
we'll
say
have
something
a
completely
further discussion about that at some point. Councillor Mr. Wright, did you have your hand up a moment ago? Mr.
Councillor Wright, sorry, can you use your microphone for me, please? Thank you.
No, I was going to mention Whittam train station,
Okay,
but
fine.
as I've just been told,
Lovely.
I won't.
Chairman, just to remind members that the issue of cycle parking was actually considered in your July session when you had the planning officers and the planning policy officers at that meeting, and that was discussed in detail. Obviously, the terms of reference do look at whether we have the right planning policies in place, and that has been covered at previous sessions and is detailed in the minutes. And at the moment, just to remind members that the evidence that you've had so far is when in terms of parking, the council is required to use the Essex Parking Standards document, which stipulates the amount of cycle parking in new developments. So what members need to sort of be mindful is that the cycling strategy is not a planning document, but will have a relationship with planning. So you've got the separate planning documents and policies which you've already looked at in earlier sessions. So obviously having Councillor Ritchie here is to explore the strategy and whether members feel that as a strategy is an appropriate policy to have in place as a current and future document. Yes. Thank you.
Thank you, Emma. Members, do you have any more questions at all? Councillor Cole-Martin?
Thank you. I don't know whether this is part of it, but it seems to me that as I approach a certain age, cycles are slightly less easy, A, to get on, and B, to keep on. And I'm just wondering whether mobility scooters, not that I need one, but I just want to know whether they are and can be classified as cycles.
No, they're not.
Chairman, that is a matter of law, I'm afraid.
Yeah, that's a matter of law and not anything to do with the cycling strategy. I do have a question about quiet lanes. So on page 24 of your cycling strategy, you've got a lovely piece about quiet lanes. And I do notice that there are quite a lot coming forward from parish councils that are in the pipeline. But I did notice that in one of the meetings, not the last Highways panel, but the one before, that they had said that they were going to remove one of them because of budget provision or push it forward. And I can see that they're getting pushed back. Obviously, that's something that we would like to encourage, I think, for cyclists. So I don't know if you've spoken to the local highways panel or had any consultation with them about the quiet lanes.
It's certainly the philosophy of quiet lanes, especially bearing in mind we are a fairly rural district too, is all we felt was really important to have within our cycling strategy. And the more that we can adopt, the more confidence it gives for people to use quiet lanes for cycling. So certainly from my perspective, it would be something that I would be happy to support. Should any local parishes or groups want to identify a road that they would like to be considered for quiet lane status, I think in the whole it aligns with the strategy, because we need to think about how we connect the rural communities with some of our town communities too. And that is something that underpins this strategy was how do we get that connectivity between rural areas and into the towns, and then town to town, and then town to back to rural again. So if there are any areas or lanes that are identified, then please let myself or the council officers know, and we will support as and when we can.
I did find that it has to go out to consultation, doesn't it, with the parish? Do you think it's quite an arduous process to actually bring it forward at all?
It needs to go through a process. And that process obviously needs to be it needs the engagement of Essex County Council and the parish, and it needs to go out to the public too. I think when you are trying to apply for a quiet lane status, I think where you start to kind of come into conflict is with other road users, which is where we've had to be really mindful of delivering a cycling strategy that's mindful of everyone that lives in the district, not just those who want to start cycling. So in the whole, obviously it needs to go through a process, and you need to go out to consultation, and you might get some kind of mixed reviews where it's then on a balance, it might not fall in the favour of those who want a lane to be adopted for quiet status, because there are other road users to consider. But on the whole, I think those that have been adopted within the district have been adopted for a good reason and on their merit. So, like I said, if people or if councillors through their parish council identify a quiet lane, I'm not saying that we should all of a sudden have like an influx of 10 or 15 applications, because I think it might be counter to what we're trying to do. But we would certainly be supportive of any that do come forward.
Well, I think there are about 10 in the pipeline at the moment from looking at the last document I looked at last night. That's quite good. I'm quite pleased that that's been looked at in that way. Now, we did speak to an Essex officer who came here about Mini Hollands, and there was talk of one being in Chelmsford, but I believe that has been shelved. Did you go in? I don't really know why, but the government gear change document says that they would like to have more Mini Hollands. Is that something that you discussed within the cycling strategy whilst you were having consultations with Essex, and what was decided?
Yeah, interesting that not only came up as part of our discussions, but it came up as part of the Emergency Active Travel Fund programme, which was being led by Essex County Council, and there were some discussions around the double roundabout up at the Coggeshall Road junction, and whether or not that could be turned into a Holland type junction. And I think this is where the benefit of having members of the public who are regular cycle users, who rather than just kind of having a PDF of a design that shows how that roundabout might work, you've got people that actually cycle that every day, but could give some detail around why it might be counter to assisting cyclists to actually traverse from one side of the road to the other, and actually some of the way that they had brought that forward in the schematics certainly kind of brought some of those questions to a head, where is this the safest way for cyclists to be able to kind of move around that area, and actually there's cyclists that were on that meeting were more kind of complementary of some other initiatives that were part of that suite of options for Braintree, rather than that kind of Holland-style roundabout. And I think through having some kind of balanced conversations, I think it soon became apparent that maybe it wasn't the best option for Braintree at that time.
That's good. I'm really pleased that you've looked at it and gone into it so that it has been scrutinised in that way. Well, the whole cycling document is very comprehensive. It is absolutely. It looks like you've covered virtually everything. Well, I think you have covered everything, and I can see that you're trying to promote cycling in the best possible way. I find it very pleasing indeed. Members, do you have any more questions for Councillor Ritchie or for Louise Clavel? Councillor Kilmartin?
Thank you. Thank you very much. Does this strategy review look closely enough at the elderly?
So we like to think that this strategy covers everyone across the district. Now, whilst you might not get the elderly wanting to commute from Housestead to Braintree on a regular basis, you might have the elderly that want to take up cycling as part of their fitness regime, or for keeping mobile or fit and healthy. And to that end, the cycling strategy covers in detail how we make cycling safer. So within that remit, we would hope to be able to reach out to those who might not be confident on a bike at whatever age they might be, so that we can make cycling safer and give the confidence to people that do want to take up cycling that there are routes or networks that would be suited for their aptitude. Not just that, we are kind of reaching out to groups who can kind of assist people with taking up cycling at an early age or at a slightly later age, so that they've got a safe bike to ride, it's in good condition, they've got clubs that they can go to, so you've got that association where you've got people that can then kind of help you do safer cycling. So we'd like to see this covered everyone across the district.
Thank you, Councillor Ritchie. I think that's a very good explanation. I know that there are all different age groups involved in cycling, and with some of the cycling groups that we have listed on our in our communications. So I think that's everything. Oh no, Councillor Hensman, if you have a question.
Yeah, just looking at the bullet points in the strategy, in that we work with developers is an aspiration. Now, it's kind of cart before the horse, or tail wagging the dog. Or usually with like Section 106, we have a wish list, and that has to be in place before a development even comes forward, so that they can then go, right, we'll do that, and that. Now, a lot of the cycle tracks and lanes and so on that we have are disjointed, don't transition easily, end on the wrong side of a very fast-moving public highway. And it's almost like, could we have a master plan of joining all those up, even looking at the existing infrastructure where it's missing, and put these all in, so that when developers come forward, they can then buy a piece of the jigsaw, if you like, rather than be presented with, well, this is what this developer thinks you're going to want, and actually, but all our cycle lanes go that way and that way, so why would we want one going down there that goes nowhere?
That's a great question, Councillor Hensman, and the simple answer to that is that now we've got an adopted cycling strategy. The planning team are going to start taking a more proactive approach around not just during the planning phase of accepting what developers think they might want to put across their development, but actually how can we start tying up some of the networks that are already in situ, but also giving advice around, actually, we've got a cycling strategy and we've got a number of plans, and actually Section 106 can be used towards delivering some of that. So not only do we start making that connectivity between development, but we also start making that connectivity again between rural and urban areas too. So as part of the holistic approach, the planning team is certainly going to start adding that to some of their pre-app or prerequisites so that we can start funding some of these projects, but also, like you said, start getting a bit of sense between developments so that they're not starting in the wrong place or ending in the wrong place.
If I can add one more, please, Madam Chair. It is interesting. We had one of the ECC highways representatives, and he said that traffic lights are beginning to be programmed to be pedestrian and cyclist with priority. So if the phases start to be put in, then people get put off going in the car because they're having to wait at lights longer, and therefore that modal shift may happen. And again, I think as part of that, we need to look at where the lights are, where the junctions are, and where we can cause the most inconvenience to the car driver to make people move over. Then you just ride past on your bike and go, enjoy sitting in your traffic jam.
Yeah, I think that's where we're trying to target this kind of modal shift and this kind of attitude shift between rather than a bike being an inconvenience for someone to use because of having to either sit in traffic or share with a car or share with a lorry, it makes it a convenient option rather than an inconvenient, and only then will we start to increase cycling, as Louise said. We specifically want to measure ourselves by doubling the amount of cycle journeys. We haven't just said increase, we actually want to double the amount of cycling journeys, and we'll only achieve that when cycling becomes a choice and the favourable choice. So rather than jumping in your car to take that mile journey down the road, it's more convenient and safer to jump on a bike because you've got dedicated cycle paths. There might be a mix of kind of cycle and walking path, but you've got your dedicated lane on that path that takes you straight to where you want to go. And it's only then when we're changing attitudes and changing mindsets and giving the people the infrastructure to do that we'll start to make progress on our strategy.
Thank you, Councillor Ritchie. I think you're absolutely right. You've got to start encouraging people and get the momentum going. Well, thank you, members. This concludes our evidence gathering session. And on behalf of the committee, I'd like to express my sincere gratitude to Councillor Ritchie and Louise for their attendance this evening and for the information you provided. It's been very, very helpful to our scrutiny review. And if you have no further questions, you're welcome. I don't think we have any further questions, do we at all? Then you're welcome to leave the meeting at this point if you wish. And thank you again. Thank you. Bye-bye. Members, based on the information gathered this evening, we now need to consider any further lines of inquiry we wish to pursue in order to inform our scrutiny review. Do members have any suggestions at all at this time, or is that something you'd like to consider?
Chairman, if I may, members have received the terms of reference, so would it be helpful if we just go through each of those bullet points to see see whether there is any lines to be considered? So members, the first bullet point was what are the perceived barriers to increasing cycling and walking provisions for local residents and communities in the district, limitations, looking at costs, e-scooter project results. The second bullet point was what actions are currently being undertaken by the council in order to link in with the government's new cycling and walking initiative gear change, as well as other local authority initiatives, looking at the Dutch roundabout as an example, and what policies criteria does the council currently have in place in relation to cycling and walking, as there is a need for the council to improve its policies to further support the provision of cycling and walking in the district, e.g. planning policies, local plan policies regarding pedestrianisation and cycling. So, members, it was acknowledged all by yourselves that the cycling draft strategy came at a time where you were looking at this review, and when the concept of this subject was put forward, we wasn't aware that this was an emerging draft policy for the organisation. So I think one of the things that members would probably be quite helpful if they reflect on the draft strategy, the strategy is now adopted by full council. There is a number of points within that strategy that sort of reflects on the evidence that you've heard through other sessions. Yes. Just to pick up a couple of points that you've had this evening, the connectivity between planning policies and planning, and Councillor Rich's comment that that the planning officers will be looking to use this as a strategy when looking at planning applications. The cycling strategy does actually reference the particular local plan policies in the strategy, so there's already that build within policies of cross-referencing through the various provisions of the council. So you've got reference to theirs, the council being the local planning authority and the planning policy authority. So in terms, if we just probably take the last one first, what policies criteria does council currently in place? I think the cycling strategy clears that bullet point in full. It's a very lengthy document, but members might want to take some time to refresh themselves as to what the policy, the cycling strategy now does, and whether there is anything. Members, you might find it useful to refresh your memories of the agenda for the special meeting of the full council on the 20th of September, because a part of that pack was the consultation exercise that was undertaken, and that broke down who responded, what were the areas of concern, so you can see what considerations were examined to start building the policy, and whether that answers your question to the third bullet point. Again, I think the second bullet point again is how does our strategy then link with the gear change? Again, that's a very large document that members read at the very beginning of this scrutiny review, and I know members were noting that that was a policy document that again crossed multiple of council services and functions and how we link into the county council. Perceived barriers to increase cycling and walking provision of local residents. Again, you may find that the consultation responses to the strategy itself answers those questions. You've already had a number of sessions where you've had colleagues from Essex County Council go through what they feel is the perceived barriers, and whether you feel after hearing all that actually you can move to make some recommendations that to be included in your report and presented to Cabinet for their consideration. I would just say to members, it is entirely possible you can look at this scrutiny review and say actually the new strategy actually answers some of the questions that you had right at the very beginning. But I would ask you to just have a look at that document, because obviously when you looked at it as members full council, you were looking at it with a different lens. Now we're asking you to look at that document in the lens of your scrutiny functions and whether it answers those three bullet points. And where it doesn't, that's where you would probably wish to make some recommendations to the Cabinet. But my usual proviso is your recommendations should be evidence-based. We have given you a certain amount of information recorded in the minutes, but obviously you've got the broadcast of those meetings should you like to refresh your memory. And if there is any points that you feel that do need to be covered in by another session, then if you would advise the chairman, then we can look to arrange a further session. But just to remind members, we are due to complete this scrutiny review by the end of the civic year. Next week is November. And time is rapidly ticking away. So if it is something you feel that we must explore, it's something that we need to deal with in a timely way. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Emma. I can't think of anything off the top of my head. I think we've had a really good go at this subject. We've gathered a lot of evidence. We've heard from a number of very good people with considerable knowledge. One thing that came out this evening, I know that cycle parking is part of planning. but I wondered if perhaps we could find a way of producing a map for cyclists to know where they can park their bike. Because before I embark, as I mentioned earlier, before I embark on a journey, I'd like to know where I could park it safely. They're very expensive and they are prone to theft. So that might be a recommendation that I might like to put forward, is that somehow we can communicate where parking is available and whether it's covered with CCTV or how, just the location so that people know. Apart from that, this evening, I've very little else, I think, in terms of recommendations. Councillor Ritchie has already answered my concerns about, or not concerns, but questions about the e-cargo bikes, and he's already on to looking at the funding that's available, which is very pleasing. Members, do you have anything you'd like to add, please, in terms of recommendations at this stage, or do you want to go away and have a think about it and email officers in due course? Councillor Wright.
You brought up about quiet lanes. We've got a quiet lane very near to where I live. I think, well, it was the first one in Essex. I thought they were going to be a much better idea than they turned out to be. Because you only get a little sign about that big that says quiet lane, or it doesn't say quiet lane, it's got a cross across it, across a car, and it's got a cycle, a horse, and somebody walking. I've walked down that lane quite a few times. The last time I walked down there, I had quite a irate van driver coming down there behind me, swearing at me, telling me to get out the way. I said, I've got priority over you. If you didn't see the sign, he said, no, I didn't see the sign. And he wanted to run me over. So they're a wonderful idea, but I think we've got to try and control the cars that go down those quiet lanes and reduce the speed limit on those quiet lanes, because that quiet lane's got a 30-mile-an-hour limit, and the rules state that it'll still be a quiet lane even though 2,000 cars go down there a day.
Yeah. I don't really think that's something we can enter into.
I know, but I was just trying to fill in some of the gaps where you talk about quiet lanes.
I understand entirely what you're saying, but it's something again that if the more quiet lanes there are, the more people will take notice.
Yeah, I quite agree, but I was just trying to add a little bit to your talking about it. That's all.
Thank you. Yes, we want to raise awareness of those, and I think
agree. That's what I say. We've got to, make them more friendly to cycling, to walking, than to cars.
Yeah.
At the moment, they're not.
Sorry, Councillor Wright. Chairman, just to assist, the trouble with quiet lanes, they are still a public highway. They are still principally a road. So all the signage that is required to be put on site must meet the regulations for highway signage. So there's always going to be a tension between what somebody knows as a local road and what somebody will know as a quiet lane. The quiet lane goes through a statutory consultation process. It's set out in some quite heavy-duty regulations, and there is a community consultation process, and then there's traffic orders. Once you've been designated as a quiet lane, then there's normally a process where there's an appropriate speed limit applied to those areas. It may be one of those recommendations that we look at as a barrier. What is a barrier to people cycling and walking in quiet lanes? So you might want to think in the context of how do we publicise those quiet lanes as being part of the recreation network rather than the main traffic network. So that's obviously a barrier as to why people may not use that as part of the recreation or the cycling transport route, because of how the tension between it's still keeping its highway status as a road, but with this designation and what that designation means to one person and what it means to a road user who's used to using it as a cut through. Or so it may be that the committee might want to sort of consider a recommendation about how the authority looks at promoting those as part of the recreational network, but like a lot of things, you highlight an area and then someone goes, actually, that's a nice little cut-off. So it's those tension and balances that we need to get. But it's something that the committee can look as a recommendation. The only thing I would just remind members is that there's an awful lot of resource on the Essex Highways website around quiet lanes, cycling routes and rights of way, walks, etc. So it is entirely appropriate that if you make a recommendation to Cabinet, the response could be that that is something that's already dealt with sufficiently by the relevant highway authority. So we need to be mindful as to what we actually want to achieve as a committee with your recommendation, because it may be actually we might feel that we need to signpost it by providing certain links and what they mean.
Yes, I did explore this actually, and there was a leaflet that Essex County Council sent out to clerks to distribute with their parish councils. So they have promoted the application for quiet lanes through that method. But it might be nice to have a list of quiet lanes somewhere on the Braintree District Council website that is linked in with the walking and cycling at some point, so that a general communication effort there might be something that would be proactive. Okay. So we've had a look at the terms of reference. Are you all happy now that you've got enough evidence? And would you like to then go away and consider if there's anything else, unless you have anything you want to raise this evening at all? Councillor Mrs. Pell.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. We referred earlier to about a leaflet that would show where you could park your bike. I did bring up in the strategy in the group looking at cycling. I had met some people who had come by train to Kelvedon Station and then had gone to the local, in Grinster Green, cafe there. And they said how lovely it was to be able to come out, that it would be nice if you did do a leaflet of various places to include the tourism that people can actually cycle to. Yes, because they thought it was a good, they was talking to me and they thought it was a really good idea.
That is quite a good idea. I've recently just provided some of my councillors' community grant to the pub, which is owned by the residents in Hellions Bumpstead, so that they will encourage tourism. And I think there is something called the Cake Trail, or the Cake something or other. So yes, please. Thank you, Jerry.
So we already have the Cake Escape, which I was busily trying to Google. In the same way as we used to have we've still got the Grape and Grain Trail that we did with Malden, where you've got a trail across the district of vineyards and breweries and that sort of thing. So we've done something as well with the Cake Escape for people that are cycling. So it promotes cycling and cycling routes, but also different cafes along the route. And some of them have signed up so that you can get either a discount on a piece of cake or something like that when you get there. So that may well be something that's worth sending out. So our tourism team, economic development team, would be able to provide a link to that. I'll have a look in a minute and see if I can find it as well, and then send that out to all of you, because it might be that that's a really good idea for now and you want to update it or look at how it can be promoted further, so that more people are aware of it.
Well, these had a dinner as well, which means it's bringing money into our district, and they could not believe the quality of what they've had, and thought it was a really good idea.
Yes, it's all part of the tourism attraction that our lovely district has. Thank you.
So members, just remind you, you're not here to fix the problem.
No.
So as this committee is as lovely as it will be able to say, right, we're going to do this. It's all those things that you want to capture in your recommendation to Cabinet. So it is having that joined up approach in our tourism offer, that it does pick up those things that if we are promoting a cycling route as part of a tourist thing, it does pick up the practicalities of parking provision, yes, all those other things, because sometimes it does need somebody outside of that service to say, well, actually, I followed this, and this was lacking, because had I known there wasn't a suitable security parking for my bike, I may have not gone on that path. So it may be the way that you word the recommendation is that a broader approach is taken to the information that we provide. Obviously, you need to still keep that balance of making sure something is informative and not a book. So
yes.
So people are not discouraged from looking, because most people like a pick up and grab. But again, maybe it's something that we need to look as a digital thing. Maybe it's a recommendation that you put to the tourism to tourism to say, if they are developing apps to look at the tourism offer within a district, can these things be included if they're not already included?
Yes, I mean, something like a small logo that just says safe bike parking, so that perhaps when somebody goes on the website and looks at the cake escape, as I have done, if there's just a logo that says this particular place has cycle parking, something like that. But I think in some way we need to inform the public about where there is parking available, and whether that be on specific business sites or in the town centre or at railway stations or bus parks. I think that is a crucial part here that we've picked up on. Councillor Kilmartin.
Well, I think after all the time we've spent on this, I'm very happy for the review to go through as it is. I don't think we need another meeting. That's my view.
Thank you, Councillor Kilmartin. Well, I think unless... Oh,
you have to raise your hand.
Councillor Corsina, that's fine. Sorry, you're just tucked behind.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I was thinking as well, promoting local cycle shops. I don't know if it's been considered as part of the cycle strategy. A recommendation being more like what was said about the cake escape. Cycle shops could also be part of the whole strategy of promoting people using cycling, and also supporting their business as well. I don't know if that's been considered as...
Yes, I think there is quite a lot in the cycling strategy about repairs and all sorts of information included in that. So I will just double check, but I'm pretty sure there is quite a lot in there already.
Chairman, just for the benefit of Councillor Corsina, because obviously this is his first meeting.
Yes.
At the previous sessions, we have shared with members through, whilst we've had officers talking, when they've made reference to initiatives that they're happening in our district, because we had the Bike Kitchen made reference to, which is a charity where people can go along and learn about bike repairs and things like that. So the committee has already received quite a lot of evidence. So again, under the heading what are the perceived barriers is, how much information is there for the public to access about how they get their bike, how they look after their bike, how they go through learning to ride safely at all ages, not just focusing on the younger children. So that is something that you've had evidence on, and you can consider drawing under that recommendation heading of perceived barriers.
Thank you, Emma. Well, thank you for your suggestions, members. These have been noted. We will ask the governance officers to progress our lines of inquiry and report back to myself and the Vice Chairman. Should you have any further suggestions for lines of inquiry outside of the meeting, please contact the governance team via the governance email account. Members, as there is no urgent business, this item concludes our business for this evening. I will therefore close this meeting of the Community Development Scrutiny Committee at... It is 2013. Thank you, members, for your attendance this evening, and to those watching the broadcast via the Council's YouTube channel, and good night.